I was standing out in my front yard late last autumn, watching a local arborist prune the massive oak tree that sits near our driveway. The tree has been there longer than our house has, and for the last few years I had noticed large sections of it looking entirely lifeless. The leaves would not grow on certain branches, and the wood looked gray and brittle. The arborist, a quiet man who clearly understood things that take a long time to grow, explained something to me that I have not been able to stop thinking about. He pointed to a thick, dead limb and told me that a tree does not usually die all at once from the outside in. It starts with branches that die but refuse to fall off. Those dead branches sit there, rotting slowly, and they begin to spread decay directly into the healthy wood they are attached to. They harbor disease. They invite pests. He told me that if you do not actively cut the dead wood away, it will eventually drag the entire magnificent tree down with it. I stood there on the grass, listening to the sound of his chainsaw tearing through the dead wood, and I felt a cold realization wash over me. I was not just looking at a tree. I was looking at an exact physical metaphor for what was happening inside my own 77-year-old body. For most of my adult life, I held a very simple, very flawed view of aging. I grew up in Ohio, the son of a hard-working man who never talked about his health, and I absorbed the belief that aging was just a slow, inevitable wearing down of parts. I thought your joints just got stiff, your energy just faded, and eventually things just stopped working. I thought the foods I ate on a daily basis were simply fuel or harmless comforts. A burnt crust on a piece of meat, a sweet drink on a hot afternoon, a packaged snack from the pantry when I was tired. I thought that as long as I was not eating to the point of absolute gluttony, my body was perfectly fine. I carried this blind spot through my 40s, my 50s, and right into my late 60s. I thought I was doing enough. I thought the deep, bone-weary fatigue I felt some mornings was just the price of getting older. I am telling you this today because I wish someone had sat me down much earlier and explained what was actually accumulating inside of me. The body warns before it collects. Most people realize far too late what their own biology has been trying to tell them for decades. Some damage happens completely silently, in the dark, microscopic spaces of our tissue, until one day it simply is not silent anymore. My perspective was violently shifted during a period when my wife, Eleanor, went through a very serious medical crisis. I do not share the clinical specifics of her diagnosis out of respect for her privacy, but I will tell you that spending weeks in hospital waiting rooms, reading pamphlets and listening to doctors breaks something open inside of you. It strips away the illusion that you have unlimited time to figure things out. When we finally got through the worst of it, and the house was quiet again, I could not just go back to my old routines. I had spent decades working in publishing and educational communication, taking dense, complicated subjects and making them understandable. I decided I needed to apply that exact same discipline to my own cellular health. I started bringing home thick medical journals, books on longevity, and research papers on the biology of aging. I sat right here in my study, in my worn leather chair, with a pencil in my hand, trying to understand what makes a body vulnerable and what makes it resilient. It was during one of those quiet mornings, while the house was still dark, that I read a term in a cellular biology paper that sounded like it belonged in a science fiction novel. The term was senescent cells. As I kept reading, I noticed that the researchers themselves informally referred to them as zombie cells. I traced my pencil under the definition and I felt my stomach drop. I learned that when a normal cell in your body gets damaged by stress or toxins, it is supposed to do one of two things. It is supposed to repair itself, or it is supposed to initiate a self-destruct sequence so the immune system can clear it away and make room for a healthy new cell. But as we age, a terrifying third option becomes more common. The damaged cell refuses to die. It stops dividing. It stops functioning properly, but it refuses to leave. It becomes a zombie cell. But these cells are not just uselessly taking up space. I sat in my chair and read what they actually do, and it disturbed me deeply. These senescent cells secrete a highly toxic cocktail of inflammatory chemicals. They actively poison the healthy cells around them. They degrade the tissue. They cause systemic chronic inflammation. And worst of all, I learned that this specific toxic environment, this localized, festering inflammation, is exactly the kind of soil where cancer cells wake up and thrive. I realized in that moment that the dead branches on the oak tree were not a metaphor. They were a literal reality inside my own tissues. This led me to a question that I spent the next several weeks trying to answer. Why did I have so many of them? Was it just the passage of time? What I found was my deepest, most profound regret. I learned that I was not just accumulating these zombie cells by bad luck. I had spent decades actively feeding them. I had spent my entire adult life voluntarily consuming specific things that both accelerated the creation of these toxic cells and paralyzed my body's natural ability to clear them out. Before I tell you about the 3 specific things I had to completely remove from my life to stop this process, I want to pause for just a moment. If you have been sitting here with me listening to these stories and you find some value in an older man sharing the mistakes he made and the things he learned the hard way, I would ask you to take a second to check if you are subscribed to the channel. My son Daniel always reminds me to mention this, and he is right. Many of you who watch every week have not clicked that button. It is a small thing, but it helps me know that these conversations are reaching the people who need to hear them. It helps me keep the lights on in this study. The first thing I had to confront was a habit I had held on to since my childhood in Ohio. I loved grilling. I loved taking a piece of meat, putting it over an open flame, and letting the edges get charred, blackened, and crispy. I thought that was where all the flavor was. It was a weekend tradition. But when I was looking through those research papers, I found a term that completely ruined that tradition for me. Advanced glycation end products. The researchers abbreviate them as AGEs. I learned that when you cook meat at incredibly high temperatures, or when you fry foods until they are dark brown or black, a violent chemical reaction happens between the proteins and the sugars. It creates these AGEs. I read what happens when you swallow these compounds. They do not just pass through you. They get absorbed into your tissues, and they act like microscopic glue. They bind to healthy proteins and cause massive oxidative stress. They literally rust your cells from the inside out. I read studies showing that a high intake of these dietary AGEs is one of the fastest ways to force healthy cells into becoming senescent zombie cells. I sat there thinking about all the burnt edges of steak, the blackened hot dogs, the heavily fried foods I had eaten over 60 years. I used to think the char was just a texture. I realized I had been eating cellular rust. I stopped it immediately. I did not reduce it. I stopped it. If Eleanor and I eat meat now, it is roasted gently at lower temperatures or slow cooked in moisture. I do not let the edges turn black. I refuse to voluntarily swallow the exact compound that degrades my tissue. The second realization came when I started looking at the liquids I was drinking and the condiments in my refrigerator. For years, I drank sweetened iced tea in the summer, and I used store-bought barbecue sauces and salad dressings without ever looking at the back of the bottle. I assumed a little sugar never hurt anyone. But I was not reading about normal sugar. I was reading about concentrated liquid fructose, high fructose corn syrup. I learned that this specific type of processed sugar does something terrible to the aging body. It bypasses the normal metabolic pathways and goes directly to the liver, where it drives the creation of visceral fat. But the detail that made me go into the kitchen and throw bottles straight into the garbage bag was learning what it does to the body's cleanup crew. The human body has a miraculous built-in system for sweeping away dead and senescent cells. It is a process called autophagy. Think of it like a fleet of cellular garbage trucks that come out at night to clear the streets. But I learned that a steady intake of liquid fructose and chronic insulin spikes completely shuts down autophagy. It parks the garbage trucks in the garage and throws away the key. By drinking sweet teas and eating processed sauces, I was putting a padlock on my body's ability to clear out the zombie cells. They were just piling up, rotting, and spreading inflammation because I was blinding my own immune system with sugar. I completely eliminated liquid sugars and concentrated fructose from my house. I drink water. I drink black tea. I drink my green tea. I learned that if you want the body to clean itself, you have to stop pouring syrup into the machinery. The third thing I found was perhaps the most hidden and the most insidious. It was sitting right in our pantry, in clear plastic bottles, with labels that promised they were heart healthy. Industrial seed oils. Soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, cottonseed oil. For decades, I had bought margarine instead of butter because I thought I was making the smart choice. I ate packaged crackers and baked goods that were loaded with these oils. When I looked at the actual biochemistry of these refined oils, I felt genuinely betrayed by the food industry. I learned that these oils are extracted under extreme heat and chemical pressure. They are highly unstable. When they sit on a shelf, and especially when they are heated in a frying pan, they oxidize. They become rancid at a microscopic level. And here's the part that I could not get out of my head. Human cell membranes are made of fat. When you consume a diet high in these oxidized, unstable seed oils, your body literally uses them to build your cell walls. You are building your house out of rotten bricks. The cells become incredibly fragile, prone to mutation, and highly inflammatory. These oils provide the exact inflammatory fuel that zombie cells need to release their toxic SASP chemicals. I realized I had been pouring gasoline on a fire I could not even see. I took a trash bag and I emptied our pantry of every single product that listed a refined seed oil in the ingredients. It took hours. It was almost everything in a box or a bag. We switched entirely to high-quality extra virgin olive oil and small amounts of real, unadulterated butter. None of this was easy. When you have eaten a certain way for 60 years, your palate is deeply conditioned to crave the char, the sweet, and the processed fat. But every time I missed a grilled steak or wanted a piece of packaged cake, I thought about the oak tree in my yard. I thought about the dead branches spreading rot. I thought about my grandson and how much I want to be able to sit on the floor and build blocks with him without groaning in pain when I try to stand back up. The cravings lost their power when I finally understood what they were costing me. It took time for my body to respond. You do not undo decades of cellular damage in a weekend. But over the course of several months, I started to notice a profound shift. The deep, heavy fatigue that I thought was just a permanent part of being in my 70s began to lift. The quiet, constant aching in my joints, the background noise of inflammation that I had learned to just live with, started to fade. I woke up feeling lighter. I felt cleaner inside. By removing the toxins that were feeding the zombie cells, and by keeping my insulin low so my body's natural autophagy could turn back on, I was finally letting my system do the work it was designed to do. I was finally cutting away the dead wood. We spend so much of our later years accepting decline as inevitable. We joke about getting old, we complain about our aches, and we continue to eat the exact things that are tearing us apart at the microscopic level. We assume that if a food is sold in a brightly lit grocery store, it must be safe. But from what I have noticed, from what I have lived, the modern food environment is not designed to keep you healthy into your 80s. It is designed to keep you consuming. Aging well begins with what you stop ignoring. It begins when you look at the food on your plate and realize that it is either feeding your healthy tissue or it is feeding the decay. You do not need fear, and you do not need panic. You just need to pay attention. If you are still eating blackened, charred meats, if you are still drinking liquid fructose, if your pantry is full of cheap seed oils, I am asking you to reconsider. I am asking you to stop volunteering for your own decline. I have found that when you finally stop poisoning your own biology, it has a remarkable capacity to clean itself up. Take the dead wood out of the yard. Give your body the respect it deserves. Take care of yourself out there. I will see you next time.